Welcome back everyone. This is Mindy for Lawnfawn, and in today's video, I'm going to be creating a winter scene on a slimline card. I'm going to start by creating my background first. So I have a piece of white cardstock that I die cut using this small stitched slimline, and I'm using this to ink blend on. This was die cut from the Lawnfawn white cardstock, and I'm using Blueprint Sketch and Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide inks with a blending brush. You can use any blending tool that you feel comfortable with. I'm starting from the very top, and I'm going to work my way down just a little ways using the Blueprint Sketch. This is the darkest color that I have, and I'm going to fade it off just a little bit. And then I'm going to bring in the tumbled glass. So I start off from the side of the card, and I'm going to go all the way across, and I'm going to meet up with the Blueprint Sketch. And I can always go back and forth if I want to darken those colors up just a little bit, or if you want to bring in an even darker color to add just a more contrast to this. But I really love these two colors together. That tumbled glass almost makes it look like it's glowing once this is all put together. Then to create my hill, I'm using the Slimline Simple Stitched Hillside die, and I have my ink blended panel off on the side so I can kind of eyeball about how high I want that hill to go. Once I'm happy with that placement, I'll hold that in place with some post-it tape and run that through the die cut machine. Now I didn't cut it through all the way on the very edge, so I'm just going to take some scissors and snip that off. Then I can bring this back to my ink blended panel just to make sure that that is how high I want it. And I love how the stitching all lines up and is just continuous throughout the front of the card. Off screen, I die cut about 10 birch trees, and I'm going to add these into my background. Now, when I was laying these out or getting an idea of the placement, there are a couple skinny trees and then there's one thicker tree. And in my mind, when I'm doing this, I want to make sure, for one, my trees kind of overlap at some point. I also don't want the same tree next to each other, so I kind of rearrange things until I'm happy with it. And then I'm going to just attach these to that card front with a tape runner. So you'll see some of them will overlap. I kind of squish them together a little bit. I don't want to have too big of a gap in between, but I do want some of those branches to overlap. And 10 was just a really nice number, an even number to go across a background. When you're working with large number of images, 10 is a really nice even number to work with. It's very pleasing to the eye and it fit really well across my background. Once I have these all in place, I'm going to bring my stitched hillside back in and line that up. And then I can attach some tape runner to that stitched hillside and just get that attached right away. I do have some of those trees overhanging, so once I have the hill attached, I'm going to flip the cardstock over and just trim off any of those excess trees at the top. Now these are really nice because you can save them to use in a small window scene if you wanted to save any of these pieces. Now I'm going to bring in the Snowy Sky stencil, and I'm going to place this over one half of my card, flip that over and hold that in place with some post-it tape. And I am working on a Ranger silicone mat. This is just really great because I can kind of see through into my grid lines on the mat underneath. And it's also protecting my surface from any pastes and things that I use. So I'm going to be using this Cosmic Shimmer. This is in the Icicle Blue Sparkle, I believe it is. And I'm going to scoop some of this out and I'm going to just gently apply this over my background. Now I have a lot of dimension already going on, so it's going to kind of almost look like my snowflakes are a little squished. It still works out really well, but I might not get the perfect coverage because our surface is not completely flat, but that's okay. I also want to make sure on that right-hand side, I don't get any over on my background. So just be careful when you're applying that. And then once I have those covered, I'm going to scoop the excess back into my jar and I'm going to just carefully peel back this stencil. I'm going to add a little bit of post-it tape here so that when I do peel the stencil off that I have something for the stencil to stick to. And we have just these gorgeous sparkly snowflakes. Now I'm carefully applying the stencil over that other side. And this is why I really love using the stencil for this, is because The snowflakes are so scattered, you can't even tell that this was only a smaller stencil. It's not a slimline stencil. So then just once again, applying some of that sparkle to the background. And then I can peel this up and let this dry. And I love having the Post-it tape hanging off of the edges because that helps me pick up my background and move it without touching anything that's wet. And see how that gorgeous sparkle, a little squished in some areas, but we'll cover some of that up with a sentiment. Now, I don't know about you, but I am loving these little bears from Den Sweet Den. So I picked the two. One of them is sleeping because that's just one of my favorite bears out of this collection. And then the other one that looks like it's reaching up for something. And I'm stamping this in the Lawn Fawn white cardstock in jet black ink. And I'm going to color them with my Copic markers. I'm using E79, E77, E74, and E71. Now on this one, since it's looking like it's reaching up to something, I'm having the darkest area on the left-hand side. That is going to be the furthest away from my light source. I used a dab of E51 to color in the muzzle, and then I'm using the same colors on this sleeping bear. So for the sleeping bear, I'm just thinking about where the furthest areas are away from the light source. So I have that being the right side of the head and then a little bit right behind the head. I look at it as the head would be casting a shadow. And then at the very bottom where it's laying on the ground. And then just blending those out. And once again, bringing in the E51 for the muzzle. Then I'll line up the coordinating dies, hold them in place with the Post-it tape, which is a really nice low tack tape, and then run these through my die cut machine. I'm going to customize the title form or the sentiment for my card. So I die cut the word snow out of Blue Jay cardstock and also fog cardstock. And I'm going to offset it just a little bit. You can see it more off on the side there on my black mat. This is just going to cast a little bit of a wintry shadow. It's not as noticeable in my pictures, but in person, it looks really cool to have this little bit of a shadow. After I finish attaching my letters using the tweezers and the liquid glue, I'm going to work on my smaller sentiment. So this is going to be a two-piece sentiment. I want my card to read, "Love ya, snow much." So I'm stamping on fog cardstock. And I'm lining these sentiments up with my MISTI. I'll prep that cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, ink this up with the Lawn Fawn embossing ink, and then I'm going to sprinkle on white embossing powder. Now I know the white is kind of hard to see, actually more in camera. In person, it's perfectly fine, but on camera, it's kind of hard to really catch it. And it's just really nice and soft to add with my kind of bright colored background. So after I sprinkle on that white embossing powder, I'll heat that up with my heat tool, and then I'll end up trimming it down into thin strips. Now for the base of my card, I have a fog cardstock that I trimmed with the large slimline stitched die, and I have another small panel that I had trimmed down just slightly smaller so it fits right in the inside of those stitched lines. And I'm just going to add this with a tape runner to my main card base. I just like having that extra white border going around my ink blended panel. Kind of helps it stand out a little bit. And you may have noticed I'm a little bit addicted to fog cardstock right now. I just kind of really like that subtle touch to the cards with the fog cardstock. After I have this ink blended panel attached, I'll start working on lining up where I want the letters to go on top of my snowdrift. So they're going to go pretty much in the middle of the card, right at the top, just kind of figuring out my spacing. And then I will attach them with the liquid glue. Now, if I had too much glue on there, I like to just dab it off with my finger. But we have that shadow layer there, which stands out kind of nice in person against the white snowdrift and the white trees. Then I have my smaller sentiments here. One's going to go up above and one underneath. And I'm just going to attach those with a tape runner. That shimmer that we added with the stencil didn't take very long to dry. I would say maybe 20 minutes, only because I didn't add a lot. It's not a very thick layer. So that was a pretty quick drying time for me. Now I'm going to add my little bears using some foam squares. So I have the one there that's reaching up to the word snow. and I have that cute little one that's sleeping underneath. So one that's excited and one that's not so excited. So I'm really happy with how this turned out and how it looks like that background is just glowing. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again real soon.